Tuesday night's daily fantasy baseball slate is headlined by a couple of guys who've gotten off to really impressive starts in 2023, with those guys being Justin Steele and Joe Ryan. They've got the highest salaries, but they are there for a reason. Our job for today is to decipher which one of these guys is off to the more sustainable start, which of them is in a better matchup, better pitching conditions, and who should we rank highest for our FanDuel lineups for tonight. We'll dive on in, break that down, and get you ready for Tuesday night's slate. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, here to break down Tuesday's 9-game main slate with locks set for 7:07 p.m. Eastern for today. Just two weather notes for the slate, and both those happen to be in the games that Joe Ryan and Justin Steele are starting. The first one is in Chicago for the Cubs and the Padres. It is just 42 degrees there, which is obviously a downgrade for batters to begin with, but also winds are in from center at 9 miles per hour. So it is a significant downgrade to bats there and a big upgrade for pitchers. And maybe we'll talk about that later on. In Minneapolis for the Twins and the Yankees, temperatures are 48 degrees, so downgrade to bats there. So both guys in good pitching conditions, but Steele gets the advantage of winds in as well. We'll break down what all that means here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. PGA Podcast with myself and Brandon Gadula is back for today, breaking down the Mexico Open. That'll be up in your feeds later on today. Check that out there, but just make sure you're subscribed, whether it be on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed or over on the FanDuel YouTube page. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up on YouTube or leave us a 5-star rating over on Apple Podcasts. The NBA playoffs are here, and you can get in on the action right from first tip with FanDuel. Right now, all customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay every weekend when you bet the NBA playoffs. That's right. Just place a 3+ leg same-game parlay or same-game parlay plus on any NBA playoff game, and you'll get bonus bets back if you don't win. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Head to the FanDuel app and get a no-sweat same-game parlay every weekend of the NBA playoffs. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. In Massachusetts, Hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789 7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700. In Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Pitching preview for this Tuesday main slate. Justin Steele comes in with the highest salary on FanDuel. He is $11,400, followed by Joe Ryan at $11,000. Nestor Cortez facing Ryan is 10.5, with Charlie Ward at 98. Eric Lauer against Tigers at 93, with Griffin Canning, Mike Clevenger, and Ryan Nelson as the others at $8,000 or higher. Now, as alluded to earlier on, the weather in Chicago is great for pitching. And we got a guy here who has shown, I would say, both this year and last year that he can shove. And I'm going to make Justin Steele my top guy as a result of that weather, putting him just a hair ahead of Joe Ryan. Now, the matchup for Justin Steele is pretty tough here, facing the Padres. And it was a tough matchup before Fernando Tatis Jr. came back, but it's just really tough overall. A 113 WRC plus against lefties on the current active roster since the start of last year, and that's with Tatis not being involved inside that equation. But Steele has proven himself in tough matchups already so far in 2023. He faced the Dodgers on the road 2 starts ago, and in that game, he had 8 strikeouts in 7 innings of 1-run ball. He had a 15.8% swing and strike rate, so he shut them down. Tough matchup. I would say the Padres in their current state might be a bit tougher, but it was a good showing for Steele, who is now at home in good weather. And this is not a surprise. Steele's been pitching well for a pretty long sample now. We have 13 starts on Steele with fewer sinkers in his repertoire. And in that time, he has a 3.44 skill interactive ERA with a 28% strikeout rate and great batted ball data. Checks every box in that regard. Now, again, back at home, pitching in great weather. So outside of the matchup, I don't find a lot of things that scare me with Steele here. And the matchup is mitigated a bit by the weather. So sure, in a vacuum, the Padres should probably scare us right now. But when they're hitting in 42-degree temperatures, winds blowing in against a guy who has done a good job with batted ball suppression, I'm going to rank Justin Steele as my number one pitcher on the main slate. With that said, Joe Ryan is right behind him. I'm going to put Ryan second. He's also in a tough spot. But for him, it's for two separate reasons that the matchup for him is difficult. The first one is that he's facing the Yankees, which is never fun, even with their lack of depth in the lineup right now. But the second thing is Ryan just saw the Yankees, so they're familiar with what he does, and he is a guy who lets up a lot of hard contact. There are a couple of reasons to be concerned here, and there are pretty obvious paths to failure associated with this profile. But in that one game, Ryan was awesome, and he's been great all year long. He had 10 strikeouts across 7 innings of one-run ball. He had a 16.3% swinging strike rate. So pitched really well against the Yankees in New York and now is at home, again, in good weather. Ryan is a different pitcher this year. He's added a splitter to his repertoire, and that's pushed his swinging strike rate for the full year up to 13.8% across 4 starts. He has a 3.24 ERA, 3.06 skill interactive ERA, and a 31% strikeout rate. And again, he's at home pitching in good weather. So there is risk here because they just saw him. Ryan does still let up hard contact, and they're a good offense. And that's why I have both have similar upsides. And I'd rather take side with Steele while both getting advantage or access to that same ceiling. But the similar upside discussion also helps Ryan in this spot if he winds up being a bit overlooked as a result of the repeat matchup. So I'm fine going Ryan. I just want to prefer Steele by a bit. To me, they're a 1A, 1B situation. Both of them are awesome. But with this being a repeat matchup and with Steele having the wind blowing in, I will go Steele pretty good 1A and then Joe Ryan pretty good 1B. As far as the value play for tonight goes, I actually want to go back to Wrigley Field. Blake Snell is the guy facing the Cubs on the opposing side of Steele, and Snell has had a rough start to this year with a lot of walks as usual, but I think this is a good situation to target him in. The Cubs, not a big walk team, 6.9% walk rate on their active roster since the start of last year. They also don't hit a lot of fly balls. The fly ball rate also matters a bit less with the winds in and the temperatures being low. So you're getting a low walk team that doesn't put the ball in the air a lot and is playing in offense that is not suitable for fly balls. That's kind of the perfect setup for Snell. And he might need that right now because he's struggling so far. 6.00 ERA, 24% strikeout rate, and a 15% walk rate. That's really, really tough. Now, to Snell's defense, there have been a couple rough opponents in there. He had the Braves twice, the Mets once, and that's not really a situation where you expect a lot of success. He did face the Rockies in his first start. That's a better matchup, and Snell had 9 strikeouts there, but he didn't finish 5 innings. So I think the 9 strikeouts says to me that he still has a path to upside, and his odds of reaching that upside increase in good weather for pitching. I have Snell projected for 6.5 strikeouts. That ranks second on the slate behind just Joe Ryan, and it's actually ahead of Steele, but I like Steele a lot more because he's better in other areas, willing enough to spend up for him, whereas Snell's salary is low. But will I have Snell in my player pool? Yeah, I think so. I think it makes a lot of sense for 76, and I think that he's very much a player we can get on board with. So to me, even accounting for salary, it's going to be Steele 1, Ryan 2, and then Snell 3. All 3 guys very worthy of spots within our player pools for tonight. Luckily, all the bad weather for hitting is where you find all the good pitchers. So we don't have to deal with that as far as stacking. Stacking is a lot easier. So let's start things off in Atlanta, where temperatures are a decent amount higher than they are in the other places. Atlanta temperatures tonight, I guess 67. So not terrible, but also not phenomenal by any means, but it's high enough for us to feel good about the Braves. The Braves are facing Brian Hoeing tonight, who's looked good in AAA to open this year, like really good. but it's just 3 starts, and he wasn't quite as hot there last year. And I think we should give the Braves a look, even while acknowledging that there is risk here, given how Hoeing is pitched in AAA. It's a total of 17 and 1/3 innings for Hoeing in AAA this year. He has a 30% strikeout rate and a 3% walk rate while getting a lot of ground balls. The ground ball part was there last year too, but the strikeouts are new because in AAA last year, Hoeing had a 6.3% swing and strike rate, and it was 4.5% in a small sample in the majors. And he let up a lot of loud contact there too, even if it was on the ground. So I'm not fully convinced the strikeouts stick, both because of his track record, but also because the swing and strike rate for Hoeing in AAA this year is just 11.7%. So tells me a lot of strikes looking, which can be sustainable if you're nasty enough. You can definitely make that work. You can get by on that. But I don't want to assume that he will suddenly be that after just 17 innings in AAA. Now he's facing a tough offense. The Braves missing some pieces, and it has hurt them for sure, but still a 104 WRC plus versus righties since the start of last year. So this will be a good test for Hoeing of whether he's actually turned a corner this year and if he is a different pitcher than what he was in the past. He may be, want to give him that credit, that possibility, but I think the Braves worth a look, even with that being acknowledged. Now, Vaughn Grissom got the night off last night for the Braves. We have not seen him click so far this year, at least not in the majors, but in the minors before his promotion, a 220 ISO, he was running down there a lot. And in the majors, at least, he's not striking out. His strikeout rate is 11%. So the batted ball data is underwhelming, but he is putting the ball in play. He has very good speed, and Grissom did hit for power in AAA before being called back up. I think that's enough for us to give him a sniff, hoping to snag him before he hits his stride. I do need to save salary with Steele and Ryan being both very high salary for today. So that's another part of the appeal of Grissom, whose salary is $2,400. Probably going to bat 7th tonight, which is not super, super appealing, but I still think he's very much in play. So if you want a value on the Braves, let's hope that Grissom is back in there for tonight. If he is, I'd be very okay riding him for $2,400. The Brewers tonight facing Spencer Turnbull. I assume, though, the roof closed in Milwaukee, which would heat things up and make it a much better park factor for tonight. And for Turnbull, it seems like he's trending up. The past 2 starts have been much better than his first 2 off of Tommy John. But assuming the roof is closed, I think the Brewers are in a good spot for stacking tonight. Up to a 4-start sample on Turnbull back off his surgery, and he has a 5.36 skill interactive ERA. His expected ERA is 6.44. He's letting up a 40% hard hit rate with a 34% fly ball rate. That fly ball rate is the reason that we're going to have the Brewers below the Braves, because that number 34% is not super high to begin with. And I think Turnbull could go back to being a ground ball pitcher, which is what he was before his injury. If he does do that, it would hurt the appeal in the Brewers because Turnbull in other areas is better than Hoeing, who also does get some ground balls. But that ground ball rate has actually been going down the past 2 starts. The 2 starts where Turnbull has pitched well, so obviously it didn't hurt him, but it has the potential to do so and does lend itself towards more upside for daily fantasy. We did see Turnbull let up a couple barrels to the Guardians last time out. He let up 1 to the Jays, 2 to the Red Sox. He's facing the Brewers here. They have a 177 ISO against righties, which means they have some power, can do some damage here. So I have reservations. I think that Turnbull was a pretty decent pitcher before his surgery, and he can get some ground balls, but those reservations are not enough to push the Brewers out of the stacking discussion for me, and I'll put the number 2 here behind the Braves. The one bummer is that we do want to favor lefties against Turnbull, and there are a lot of really good hitters in the Brewers who are righties. So Rowdy Tellez, Christian Yelich, totally fine. Yelich with the speed, Tellez with the power. But after that, I want to start to turn towards the righties. I think William Contreras should start to hit for power here pretty soon. Just a 108 ISO right now, but he's making solid contact. He's not striking out. I think he's a good value at 26, even though it does force you to occupy both your catcher / first base and utility if you use Contreras alongside Tellez, which I'd like to. So it's a bummer to lose that flexibility, but I think it's a worthwhile trade-off for tonight. As for our third stack, I think that for Mike Clevenger's past 2 starts, the opposing team has been the 3rd-ranked offense for stacking both times, and I'm going to keep the trend rolling for today. I like the Blue Jays, especially if they don't wind up catching a ton of attention for daily fantasy for today. I think there's a good chance that they do because they have a pretty high implied total, but I still think that there's wiggle room to feel good about them for stacking, even if they do wind up being a bit popular. The reasons for those first two stacks, the reasons I went against Clevenger those two times, are still very much in play, where Clevenger's underlying numbers this year are rough. Across 4 starts, he has a 3.26 ERA, but his skill interactive ERA is 5.67, and his expected ERA is 6.24. So he's gotten pretty lucky in his results. Those numbers are poor due to bad plate discipline numbers, and Clevenger is also letting up a 45% fly ball rate. Obviously, with the low ERA, he's worked his way around it, but the Phillies did get to him a bit last week. They had 2 home runs, 3 earned across just 3 innings. The Pirates scored 4 runs against him. Now he has to face the Jays, who have a 117 WRC plus against righties. I'm assuming the roof will be closed here as well, and assuming that's the case, it's a good park for hitting, and I think we should keep on stacking against Clevenger until Clevenger improves or the regression fully hits. So not going to be overlooked by any means, but the Blue Jays, to me, a good spot to go for stacking for today. Now, within the Blue Jay stacks, George Springer didn't start last night, came off the bench, hit a ball pretty well. That's kind of been the story of his year because his WOBA is just 257, but his expected WOBA is 346. He has a 12.7% barrel rate, which is up from 8.3% last year, and he is running because he has 3 stolen bases. So when you look at the baseline numbers, I kind of thought that Springer might be cooked given all of his knee injuries, but he's running. He's making hard contact, just potentially getting a bit unlucky. So I think that Springer still has juice to give us upside for DFS. So Springer, I initially thought I might be a bit lower on, but after digging in a bit more, I'm higher on him. I do feel good about him for tonight. So the top stacks for today, 3 Bs, the Braves, Brewers, and the Blue Jays. Things to watch. Mason Miller making his second start tonight for the A's. And I'm not going to get there for DFS, but that's not due to skepticism around the talent. If you watched some of his stuff against the Cubs, it was pretty sick. It's more about volume. We've seen Miller not pitch a lot in the minors so far because of injuries primarily. And he went 81 pitches in his first start. I haven't projected for 85 for today. Now, he could go beyond that, but with all the injuries, I think that 85 is probably about right. I will bump it if they let him go longer going forward, but for right now, I need to see more of him before I ride with it. So excited to watch him again because he was super fun in that first start, but need to see that pitch count higher before I buy fully it. I'm not opposed to the Mets for stacking. They're facing Josiah Gray, who is a radically different pitcher now than he was last year. Towards the end of last year, added a sinker, and it did help his fly ball rate, help his hard hit rate, and that's carried over to this year with even much better, I would say, numbers in those regards. But Gray, very few strikeouts. He's facing a very tough team today with a 123 WRC plus against righties. That the Mets WRC plus is the top number on the slate. So I think they grade out well enough for us to consider them, even though I respect what Gray has done, think he has improved, that I think that we can still at least consider going at them here. Finally, I don't mind one-offs again if you like any Tigers. The if you like any Tigers part there plays a pretty big role because you might not. They're facing Eric Lauer. He's a lefty who lets up a lot of fly balls, a lot of hard contact, which is always good for opposing batters. So Spencer Torkelson might be fun. Javier Baez has okay numbers against lefties. Truly hideous against righties, hideous against most people, but better against lefties at least. So I think you can consider those guys. If you need a one-off, you need to save some salary, I think they're at least in the consideration set due to the matchup that they have. Finally, let's go to our dinger calls for today. Sticking out there in Milwaukee for the boring one, Rowdy Tellez facing Turnbull. Turnbull's ground ball right does go down against lefties, letting up a lot of hard contact right now. Tellez can mash it. Roof should be closed. So Rowdy Tellez, the boring home run call for today. The fun one, kind of want to go Brandon Belt. I've been keeping a close eye on him recently because had that ridiculously awful start to the year with tons of strikeouts. They gave him a couple of days off and have kind of been giving him more days off sporadically here recently. And it seems like it's helping. Strikeout rate down to about 27% since April 11th when he first got that extended day off. had 3 hard hit balls last night with no strikeouts. So it's possible he may be turning things around. Salary is $2,400. So I'll at least give it a shot. So the home run calls for today will go with Rowdy Tellez, the boring one, and Brandon Belt for the fun one. That is all that we have here for today on the solo shot. As mentioned, though, we are back once again later on today to break down the Mexico Open from a PGA DFS perspective. Make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get that as it is posted. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at JimSannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down Wednesday's slate. This has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.